This Thursday episode of Pushing the Pile, we'll be previewing all the top matchups of the weekend, and what a
No,
weekend it is. Absolutely loaded slate. Lions, Vikings, Eagles, Giants, Jets, Steelers, Chiefs, Niners, Packers, Texans, Steelers, Jets, and then we'll finish with a little Thursday night football preview. But we're going to kick it off here with our bold predictions. We have Brian McFadden on, as we do every single Thursday. We have Kyle Long joining us, as he does for every Push in the Pile episode. And we're getting into what we think is going to happen this weekend. So, B-Mac, let's start with you, buddy. What do you think is what's the bold prediction that's on the top of your mind that you think is going to shock the football world this weekend?
of course, every week I love giving you guys something to really think about when it comes to being extremely bold, right? I played in the secondary. We take chances. We try to make plays happen, create interceptions. So I'm going to try to create something right now. When you talk about one of the more highlighted ball games involving two young, legit quarterbacks, give me the Houston Texans traveling to Lambeau to play against the Green Bay Packers. My bold prediction for that ball game, Mike, both teams, both offenses will combine for at least 60 plus points in that outcome. I think it's going to be an entertaining game. You look at Jordan Love, what he's doing, throwing the football, orchestrating their offense. The same can be said for CJ Stroud. And we're still waiting for that CJ Stroud-ish game where he just kind of takes over the offense and just make things happen with his arms. I think this is the game for CJ Stroud to put up video game-like numbers, most importantly, score points. And the same could be said for Jordan Love. We saw what he did last week. And right now, when you look at Jordan Love, Mike, it's safe to say there's no concerns with that knee injury he was dealing with earlier in the year. I think he's far removed from that injury. I think he's feeling as close to 100% if we've seen the entire season before week one. I think he's going to have a heck of a day as well. So that's my bold prediction. The Houston Texans, the Green Bay Packers will combine for at least 60 plus points in Sunday's matchup.
I love that shout out. 47 and a half points is the over under for that game. So that would be a big over. And I like it because these were the last two kind of QBs, obviously before this year's rookie class, to enter into that franchise quarterback territory. We saw them both do it last year. Obviously, CJ Stroud's a rookie, Jordan Love in his very first year as a starter. But I think both are really coming into their own. And now no Nico Collins. Obviously, he's been out the past couple weeks. He went on IR. But I don't think that really matters. The Texans have weapons for days. This will be the test, though, for this Packers defense. They've been playing a lot better of late. You saw it the past 2 weeks, whether it was the Rams, whether it was the Cardinals. They took care of business on that side of the football. But I think a lot of Packers fans are still kind of waiting for that shoe to drop. They've been burned too many times by defensive turnarounds to know that at some point the wheels are going to fall off. And I think against this Texans offense is one that they just present so many challenges. Is Bobby Slowick going to let them rip, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Are they going to, if the run game's not there? Because a lot of times this year, they have consistently tried to run the football, even when it's not working. Now, it's a lot better with Joe Mixon's in there than who they had prior to that. But I do think that's the biggest question to me is, do they just let CJ cook in this game? All right,
I
my bold
think
prediction.
when you look at the type of offense that they're going to see, Green Bay, they're going to score points. So this could be a racetrack type affair when you're trying to keep pace with the Green Bay Packers, because one thing that I'm seeing with Matt LaFleur, he has all the trust and faith in his quarterback in Jordan Love, and he's going to put the football in his hands. And to your point, I love what I'm seeing with Joe Mixon in the offense with the Houston Texans. But this might be a ball game where you got to try to keep pace with the rabbit. So the rabbit could be the Green Bay Packers or it could be the Houston Texans. But I can tell you this much, being a defender, something I don't usually say, I'm all here for the points if that happens Sunday in Lambeau Field.
Well, with how the season started, I think we're all here for the points, man. This season was points were tough to come by the first few weeks. It feels like offenses finally came around here. So I could see it. I could see it. All right, my bold prediction. And I don't know if it's Super Bowl. This is one of the better teams in the NFL, but they're facing a red hot Ravens team. I think the Tampa Bay Bucks at home punch this Ravens defense in the mouth, continue their streak, 3 straight 30-plus point games now. They dropped 51 last week. I don't want to face this Bucks offense right now, the way Baker Mayfield's playing, the way this running game is playing, the way this offensive line is playing for the Buccaneers. So I think Ravens go down to Raymond James, and I think the Bucks give it to them, put up 30 plus, go away with a victory, and stamp themselves atop the NFC South.
And if that happens, you have to throw in Baker's name in the MVP conversation if that happens. To your point, talking about having another 30-plus game as an offense, you look at what he's done, because when they're scoring points, Baker is throwing touchdowns. They don't run the football in the red zone. They don't even really try to. And when they do, they don't really get anything done running the football. So they rely on Baker in the red zone to be smart with the football and to make timely plays. And if that happens, yes, you have to legit have Baker Mayfield in that MVP conversation in the first quarter of the season. And this is a huge opportunity for Tampa as well, because you look at where we see them in the NFC. If they can take care of one of the best teams in the AFC, you have to start putting respect on their name and what they can do moving forward. Outside of them having that hiccup a few weeks ago against Atlanta, this has been a very, very successful season, to say the least. But yeah, to your point, if they can score points against Baltimore and Baker outplays the leading MVP candidate, if I had to give a vote right now in Lamar Jackson, yeah, let's keep it. Let's go ahead and put some fuel on that fire. Baker Mayfield, MVP.
And everybody knows about Lamar's legs. Baker's got 136 rushing yards on the season. He's doing a little work on the ground when he has to. Now, it's obviously not a big weapon in that offense. It's more like, hey, when things break down, he can make a play. But I just think now, if they have the running game we saw last week, and now obviously it could be an aberration. It was against New Orleans Saints. But I think when you just look at this offensive line and kind of what they've done, getting guard Cody Mock out in space a lot more. He's an undersized guard, really skinny, a guy that can really fly, though, on the end. He opened up a lot of those big plays we saw a week ago. I think they know they have something here with this kind of retooled offensive line that they drafted so many guys in recent years to improve. I think it's a unit that can move the ball still against this Ravens, although the Ravens do still have the best run defense in the NFL. So I will give that caveat that moving the ball against this Ravens defense is still going to be difficult, but I think they do a little bit more on the ground than most teams have done against the Ravens this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll say this too. The Buccaneers run offense, they're better with Bucky Irvin and Sean Tucker. And the reason why, Mike, is because both running backs, they have a burst. You can see their burst instantly when they get the football in their hands. When you look at White, it kind of takes some time for him to get going. But instantly when Bucky Irvin, Sean Tucker, from what we saw last week, instantly when they get the football in their hand, they're hitting that X button on your PlayStation 5 controller. And they're moving full speed. And that improves the offense, because me personally, being a former defender, give me the running back that doesn't have that type of burst. Because it's easy for us to swarm to the football. It's easy for us to kind of neutralize and keep containment. But when you have a running back that's quick and has a burst, like those two running backs that I mentioned, it makes everything go. So just think about how good Baker Mayfield could be, their offense can be, if they find a way to establish a legit rushing attack, which will provide balance. Because to your point, their success has pretty much been about throwing the football around the yard. Outside of last week's game against the Saints. But if they can kind of implement that into their game, that offense will be a real high-level offense when you talk about having balance.
Yeah, I think I said maybe it was week 2 or week 3. I was like, I think Rachaad White's days are numbered as the number one in Tampa Bay. This Bucky Irving back, he's decisive. And when he decides, it just looks different than Rachaad White. Rachaad White just has this indecision, the way he runs, and I think you see it in the productivity. It's just Bucky Irving's been far more productive. So I like it. All right, we got Kyle Long. Kyle, what's
going on, boys?
Bold prediction for week 7 of the NFL season?
Yeah, my bold prediction, I'm going to be taking my bold prediction to the West Coast, where the Kansas City Chiefs are traveling to play the 49ers. We've been raving about this right guard, Dominic Puni, in the run game. Well, unfortunately, he's got a huge matchup against Chris Jones and this Kansas City Chiefs front. I got Chris Jones getting 2 sacks this week against our guy, Dominic Puni. I think he does a good job in the run game. He'll probably hold up. He'll piss Chris Jones off just enough to go get Brock Purdy twice. I think it could be the difference maker in the football game when it comes down to 2 football teams who like to run the ball and they play physical defense. Who's going to get after the quarterback more? It's going to be Chris Jones twice on Sunday.
I'm not going to let the Puni slander fly. This is the reason they drafted him, was for this game. Well, for the Super Bowl last year, and thinking you're going to play a team that has some interior pressure. But Chris Jones took over that Super Bowl. He's not in that game. That game goes much differently, in my opinion. But also, I think if Dominic Puni's in that game might go much differently. He's been so good as a rookie. So I can't get on board with this one, Kyle. I just can't. I can't let
It's got to be the difference maker, Mike. You look for an X factor in that football game, and honestly, both these quarterbacks, I'm not even going to lie, with the current body of work from this season, it's hard to pick one of the two. I mean, I know if we're looking at the career, it's like the easiest pick in the world. You pick Patrick Mahomes without even thinking about it, but the X factor is going to come down to the line of scrimmage. Who can establish the run? Who can hold up in protection on third downs? Because you and I know, B-Mac, third down conversions is where it's going to come down to. You can run the football all day, but you got to throw it eventually. And when you do, who's going to protect? I got Chris Jones getting home twice.
Hey, that will become a reality. Now, will he get both sacks on one individual? I don't know, because he loves to move around. I've never seen a defensive lineman have the freeway to line up anywhere he wants to on the front and just do whatever he wants to do, right? But it works for them because he's that type of guy. You know, you look at Kyle playing the offensive line as long as you did in your career. Do you ever recall a defensive lineman can line up at the 3 to 5, it doesn't matter, and just pick and choose where he wants to go depending on the down and distance? Have you ever seen that before?
The only other guy that I can remember that did it with that relative of ease was a guy that wore number 99, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I work with him on Sunday. He goes by the name of J.J. Watt. We call it playing the piano. Only a handful of guys can hit all the keys. You know what I'm saying? And J.J.'s one of those guys, and so is this fella 95 in red. So I'm excited to watch him go. He drives people crazy. And I mean, I had to practice against him for one spring and summer, and I had enough, man. I was ready to go home after just that.
There's one thing you got to do if you can line up everywhere like that. You got to win. The coaches will give you that freedom if you're the guy that can win every time. I remember JJ telling the story about Wade Phillips. He's like, the first time I freelanced, he said, don't ever do that again. Second time I freelanced, he said, I told you the first time. Third time I freelanced, he said, you can do that anytime you want, because he just kept doing it. He kept working out for him and the Houston Texans. All right, we're going to get to the matchups that are going to decide this weekend. After this, I said a lot of insanely good games. Last week was kind of a dud. This week, I think, is going to live up to the hype. Can't wait right after this. We're starting with the game of the weekend. Only one loss between the Lions and Vikings heading into this big Sunday NFC North matchup. So many amazing matchups to watch. Sadly, Aiden Hutchins will not be one of them after a season ended a week ago against the Dallas Cowboys. But to me, the one I want to watch as a big all-22 guy, a big X's and O's guy, is Ben Johnson, Brian Flores. I mean, if you're just talking about coordinators on their respective sides of the ball, these guys are top 3 minds in the NFL right now, probably the top 2 head coaching candidates for the next coaching cycle. So seeing what each has in store in such a big matchup with such massive NFC North implications, B-Mac, I'm going to start with you. What do you expect? How do you think this one's going to go down?
This will be like a playoff game, in my opinion. Number one, the atmosphere is going to be electric there in Minnesota. Skol! That's all you're going to be hearing. That's all you're going to be hearing, right? So that's number one, just the atmosphere. This is what we live for as football fans, knowing these type of matchups when you have good on good from the coaching, from the personnel, and they're all going to be playing at their best. So the atmosphere, but what I'm looking for, when you talked about the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator matchup, mine kind of ties into that, right? Because for me, Brian Flores, his defense, they have to be in their bag. They got to have a heck of a day for them to be able to win this ball game. And here's why. You look at what they've done throughout this 5-game winning streak they're currently in the midst of. They have been harassing every quarterback they face. They have made life miserable from the standpoint of confusing and from the standpoint of just being super aggressive and getting home in the pocket. That has to continue. Secondly, when you talk about Detroit, their offense, when you allow Jared Goff to get into a rhythm, it's hard to get him out of that 2-step when he's dancing in that rhythm because he gets things going. Then lies the opportunity to open the entire playbook for the Detroit Lions. So watching Jared Goff, when he's been at his best, he's been able to work from the confines of a great pocket. But when he struggled, pressure. He does not do well against pressure. He does not do well against blitzes. So if Brian Flores, not if, because we know he's going to dial up major blitzes, but getting home and making sure you collapse that pocket is super important for them to be successful. So that's what I'm watching, because watching Jared Goff, even going back to his Rams days when he was playing for the Rams, he did not handle pressure well. And up until this point, he still has issues with pressure. Can he handle the pressure? We will wait and see. But if they can get home, there lies the opportunity to be successful against Jared Goff.
I think what makes that Lions offense unique, and to your point about the Vikings, they get after quarterbacks. They like to get them off their spot. But this Lions team, they take your sword and they force you to play defense with your sword. You can no longer attack because we're coming downhill at you. I mean, this has been the story of the Lions, the way they've drafted, the way they put together this roster. It's to be able to protect Jared Goff in advantageous situations. I'm talking third and manageables. They stay on schedule better than anybody, in my opinion, on first and second down by nature of the belief and the confidence in that unit up front. They put the roster together. Ben Johnson puts the game plan together. And when they put you within sniffing of the first down line, that's when Jared Goff can either go heavy play action and take a shot, because we got another down, next down, to get the first down on the ground. But that's when Jared Goff can take shots. He kind of catches you in between beats as a defense, and he tries to make you pay for it. So how is Flores going to try to mitigate that risk and stop them on first down? And how is Jared Goff going to be able to take advantage on those lulls in energy on the huge plays down the field?
Yeah, what I'm looking for is this Lions game plan from like a formational perspective. Ben Johnson does so much in terms of the flexibility that he does with multiple tight ends, 6 offensive linemen, those sort of things to really throw off the blitz looks. And we saw it last year against the Vikings. Lions put up 30 points against them in both games a year ago. And now obviously a little different animal walking through that door in Minnesota this year, what we've seen. But I will say Blake Cashman, one of the guys who's been so key to those blitz packages, their free agent linebacker that they signed this year, will not be playing. And then you look at the Lions this year, Jared Goff, highest yards per attempt of anyone against the blitz. But number 2 on their list just happens to be Sam Darnold. So I think that side of the ball is interesting too, for me, is what the Vikings will do offensively, because they may not be with Aaron Jones this week. He may be hurt with that hamstring. And if he doesn't go, there's such a massive drop off in that Vikings backfield, in my opinion. He's so key to that stretch zone game they love to bring to the table. This Lions run defense, top 3 in the NFL right now. If they're not going to be able to run the football and they make Sam Darnold one-dimensional, all of a sudden I think the Vikings could be in trouble if they're coming from behind, because they haven't been behind. Have only trailed for 3 minutes and 28 seconds all season long. 26 seconds all season long. I didn't even give enough credit there. This team has been a house, but I do think against this Lions, it's just a little different animal than what they faced this season.
Real quick, guys, can we give Kevin O'Connell some flowers real quick? Because you talked about not knowing if they will have Aaron Jones or not. To your point, I agree. It would be a big drop-off because he's a big-time dual threat back for them. But think about the adversities they've been hit with, right? You think about the unfortunate death to Kyrie Jackson in the offseason, right? Thinking about that battle, that hurdle you need to get over as a team. Then you think about losing J.J. McCarthy in preseason, and then losing your starting corner, Mekhi Blackman, as well as you got ready for the season. And then T.J. Hawkinson still is rehabbing, his season ending injury from a year ago, and they're 5-0. Like, that is overly surprising for a team to be dealing with so many hurdles, which happens in the National Football League. But a lot of those injuries happen before the start of the season, along with the unfortunate death to an individual who they drafted who was going to be a contributor, and they haven't blinked at all. So that tells you the type of leader that Kevin O'Connell is, along with being a super, really good coach, bro, because those are things that really would make organizations go downhill, mostly for that year when you're dealing with so many adverse situations. So for them to be undefeated, I think we don't really highlight some of the things they've been dealing with for them to be where they currently sit in the moment of their season, to be undefeated and to be looking like one of the best teams in the NFL, just not the NFC.
Yeah, that NFC North is so strong. It's going to be interesting to see which one of these teams comes out on top of this matchup, because obviously any of these teams from the division are dangerous. We've talked at length about the Bears, the Packers. Mike's a big Packers fan, so we talk about them all the time. but the Lions and the Vikings are right there at the top of the NFL, not just the NFC North, not just the NFC. These are teams that are at the top of the pecking order. We're going to find out if Minnesota's for real. I tend to think, to your point, that Kevin O'Connell's a fantastic coach, coupled with Brian Flores. It's just a match made in heaven there. It's almost football paradise for guys like Mike that enjoy breaking down the all 22 and getting into the weeds. And for the Lions, they're going to try to just brute their way through this thing. And you talked about next man up and grit. That's what the Lions are all about. So we're going to find out who's grittier this weekend.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to not only the coaching, but the rosters these teams have built. Because you mentioned all the Vikings injuries, but now the Lions defensively, the amount of starters they're down from what was projected beginning of the season. Aiden Hutchinson, who we'll still see how they deal with that loss. We haven't really talked about it much, but he was a one-man pressure package on his own through the first 6 weeks of the season until that gruesome injury he went down with. So losing him, losing Marcus Davenport, who was your other starting defensive end, losing John Kaminsky, who was your third string defensive end, losing Emmanuel Mosley at corner, Ifatu Melfanu at safety, Derek Barnes at linebacker. It's like those were all guys who were penciled in to be starters for you, and to be down them and still getting the results, still holding the Dallas Cowboys to less than 10 points. So these two teams, yeah, they definitely belong in that, as Kyle said, best teams, not only in their conference, not only in their division, but among the whole NFL. All right, let's get to the Eagles Giants. Hit on some matchups from that game real quick, because the Giants will be without Andrew Thomas at left tackle. We'll see if Malik Nabers is able to play in this one, but this one's more from the Eagles' perspective. I think this falls in at a 3-3 team as a must-win. They have to come away with this to not only keep pace with the Commanders, but keep pace with the wild card now in the NFC that looks like it's going to be a 10-win team. It looks like you're going to have to get to double digits because there's a lot of good teams now, surprisingly, in the NFC playoff picture, and the Eagles are kind of on the outside looking in. So, Kyle, I'm starting with you. What do you think? How do you think the Eagles match up with the Giants in this one, and do they come away with the W?
Well, I think it's interesting. There's a few storylines at play. Obviously, when you think about Nick Sirianni and the beef he had with his own fans and the unsure nature that the fans of Philadelphia must have about their coach. I mean, I know we got people in the control room that are big Eagles fans, and nobody really knows what to think about this Sirianni stuff. It doesn't sit well with them. The other thing, you got Saquon Barkley returning to MetLife to play against the Giants. You know, he's been so unbelievable in the green and white, and I can't wait to see how him behind a healthier version of this Eagles offensive line will look. And obviously the matchup up front for that Giants front seven, that's going to be the story of the game. Are they able to move this group in the run game? The Eagles, that being the case, if the Eagles can move this Giants front. And I think the Malik Nabers situation, if Malik Nabers is able to get back out there, he has shown flashes of being one of the best wide receivers, not just rookies, one of the best wide receivers in football. And if Daniel Jones can have that confidence to have a target like that on the football field, we could be looking at relative chaos on the back end for this Eagles defense. I know we've got some young guys in there for the Birds playing, and they're playing well, but you get a guy like Malik Nabers, and he can challenge any group, any matchup that he has. So that'll be their saving grace. And if he's not out there, it could be tough sledding for the Giants. It is all about a must-win situation for Philly. You just said it. You and I both know it. If the Eagles don't get their game together and start beating teams that they should by more than 5 points, we could be looking at real trouble in the city of brotherly love.
Yeah, this is a must-win for Philly, and this is a winnable game for the Giants. You know, when you look at the Giants, when it comes to talent, 9 times out of 10, depending on who they're facing off against, guys, they're not the most talented team on the football field. But they fight. They play hard. They should have won that ball game last week against Cincinnati. But that's the issue. They got to learn how to finish games to win them. Right now, they're learning how to lose ball games. That's not a good sign. So until they figure out finishing games, they're always going to be in this conundrum of, confusement when it comes to the latter parts of ball games. And for Philly, their offense, they're too talented of an offense to be so inconsistent, right? Either Jalen Hurts is turning the football over, or just there's a misconnect with his pass catchers. And then last week, Saquon Barkley, the running game was not there. To your point, Kyle, can they run the football? Because what we saw week 1 against Green Bay in Brazil, we felt like this offense, when you look at all the high-level players they have, this was going to be a very, very difficult offense to stop. But since that Green Bay matchup, they have kind of dwindled down when it comes to production, when it comes to scoring points on the football field, especially in the red zone. So that falls on coaching because the cupboard is not there in Philly. You got a quarterback who we all respect. You got a running back who we all respect. You got tight end. You got wide receivers who we all respect, along with a loaded offensive line. So they got to find a way to get this done. But if they play around with their food, they're going to walk away hungry because the Giants will eat it.
Yeah, I want to see this Eagles team put 30 up. They are too good, too talented to be averaging just over 21 points per game. And I know they've had injuries to A.J. Brown. I know they've had injuries to Devontae Smith. They haven't been fully healthy all season long. But there really are no excuses for this roster, man. This roster is more than talented enough, and Jahan Dotson is more than talented enough to still produce. And he's not. The rapport he has right now with Jalen Hurts is next to nothing. Those guys don't even probably look at each other on their way back to the huddle after some of these plays because flat out just Jalen Hurts is missing them left and right. It's just such a weird mismatch of this offense and what they're trying to do and using these two tight end sets that consistently don't work in the running game because your second and third tight end are not good run blockers. And I talk about it every single week because this O-line's so good and they're so good in pass protection and they're doing their job in the running game. But it's so frustrating to watch these tight ends blow stuff up, to watch Saquon Barkley and his vision sometimes just be a little bit suspect behind that offensive line and just feel like this offense is out of sync consistently. And I think, as you mentioned, B-Mac, that's coaching at the end of the day, is when you're out of sync this consistently with the players they have, that unfortunately comes back down to the coaching staff. All right, we're going to get to another New York team, a new team with a little wide receiver named Davante Adams. The New York Jets, they're on Sunday Night Football this week, traveling to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll preview that matchup right after this. Sunday Night Football, Jets at Steelers. So many good storylines heading into this one, whether it's the newly minted New York Jets wide receiver Davante Adams, the possible quarterback controversy that Mike Tomlin won't sort of commit to, whether it's Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Russ taking some first-team snaps this week, finally back healthy. B-Mac, I'm going to go right to you, the resident Steeler here. What are you looking for in this matchup between these two teams? Kind of taking a step back in recent weeks, but needing this one to get themselves back in their playoff pictures.
Well, I'm looking for chemistry once again with the Steelers offense. And you guys, I got some breaking news. I know who's going to start at quarterback. I'm just joking. I don't know.
Oh, come on.
We all go wait and see. We will be waiting patiently to see who Mike T trots out there with the ones. My bad, Kyle. I got you fired up, but I was just joking. But with me, it's about chemistry, right? Because what we saw last week against the Raiders, Kyle, we saw an offense that scored 30-plus points. The first time that had happened the entire season. We saw offense that were sustaining drives. We saw a big play offense, right, under Justin Fields. So can that continue? Will that continue? Because the game before the Raiders, the offense was a bit stagnant against the Dallas Cowboys. So something clicked for Pittsburgh. Either it was the opponent or just the offensive strategy, or two things could be true that led to them having a great day. So can they continue? For me, that's the thing that I'm watching. And that's why the quarterback is so important, because that was the best that Justin Fields looked as a starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you're thinking about removing him out of the lineup after a game where he really, really looked good, there lies the bigger question. Can Russell Wilson give you the same like production or even better? Because if you remove Justin Fields out of the lineup after scoring 30-plus points, being 4-2, and bring in the savvy vet and Russell, if there's a drop-off in anything offensively, that's the first thing we are going to talk about. Was that the best move? Was that the right thing to do? So that's what I'm looking for. It's about offensive production, because their defense, Pittsburgh-wise, we know their defense is going to be there. We're not going to see ball games like they had against the Colts where they really couldn't get off the football field and get stops. That's not going to happen more than none. So for the most part, they're going to do what they're supposed to do. If they can get the back end of their offense, Now you're talking about a team that will be cooking with gas.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, emotional and otherwise, watching this Pittsburgh Steelers football team play, because sometimes their offense goes out and Justin Fields is cooking. And sometimes, and more often than not, it's 3 and out. I mean, they've been near the bottom of the league in terms of third down conversion rate or going 3 and out as an offense. But you and I both know this defense, as it historically has, is a huge part of them winning football games and having big shifts in momentum. One thing we've seen historically with Aaron Rodgers in a Jets uniform, he's on the ground a lot. He gets hit. So this Steelers football team, as you and I both know as well, they're going after the football, not just Aaron Rodgers. So look for a couple turnovers, maybe sack fumbles going against this unit that's been less than really good with the New York Jets offensive line. They haven't been great. So if you're going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler this weekend on Sunday Night Football, go get it away from Aaron Rodgers. That'll help your team, whoever they trot out at quarterback.
Yeah, I think the story of this game is both O-line are wildly overmatched. Yeah, I mean, whether it's the Jets against the Steelers front, and even though they're at like full strength, it's just the Steelers front overmatches everyone. Or it's the Steelers, who are now down 3 starting offensive linemen from their week 1 roster, with center Zach Frazier, who even as a rookie was probably their best offensive lineman this year. Down 3 starting offensive linemen against this Jets front. So if I'm debating, hey, is this the game to bring back Russell Wilson, let him start? I'm saying, heck no. He's going to be under fire in the drop back passing game. You have to have someone back there that can create on their own and someone who can add to the running game. Because if the Steelers are going to win this game, they have to do it on the ground. That is where the Jets have been susceptible this year. We saw it week 1 against San Francisco 49ers. We've seen it throughout points of the season, whether it was the Denver Broncos game where they rolled in that second half of the game Denver did. So that's where they're susceptible. You're going to win this game, Pittsburgh. It's going to be on the ground, and Justin Fields just gives you more options in that running game, literally and figuratively. So, yeah, to me, it's got to be Fields, but a lot of the matchups are really pointing to the Jets' way in this one, truthfully. It's just that team right now with Davante Adams, and I think it's going to be a quick getting him up to speed. But I think that offense starts to hum. I truly do. I think he needed the second guy there. He's wanting to throw to anyone besides Garrett Wilson, but just hasn't had anyone to trust. Now with Davante Adams, I think he does. I think he does in that offense.
It'll be much better. It'll be much better, the Jets offense with Davante and Aaron. And I can't wait to see it. I know that's what the world's going to be wanting to see. But to your point, I'm excited to see how these offensive lines protect their quarterbacks. They're both behind the 8 ball as it pertains to roster and injury. So that's really the matchup I'm looking at.
There you have it. See, sorry. Go ahead, be back.
No, I was just saying, we've been talking about how much better Davante Adams is going to make the Jets offensively, right? And I agree. But their offensive line, and one thing we're noticing with Aaron Rodgers, he's not as mobile as he once was. Maybe it's the age factor or just the injury factor, or both things could be, limiting his ability to be mobile. But he's not able to make people miss or evade defenders like how he used to. Aaron Rodgers used to make people miss, buy time, get out of the pocket. When you watch Aaron Rodgers in the pocket now, it's almost like he's embracing the contact. He's embracing the pressure. That's not Aaron Rodgers, and that's why they've surrendered so many sacks, because if your quarterback is not trying to make people miss, he's a sitting target right now. So, yes, you add Davante, big time, contributor in the passing game, but Davante can't help the offensive line play. So, we know about TJ Watt. Also, Alex Highsmith should be returning to the lineup as well for Pittsburgh. Remember, the last few weeks, they didn't have Highsmith in the lineup. You had Herbig, who's been out with a hamstring, but now you get Highsmith back, who's a double-digit sack guy when healthy, to pair up with TJ. Those two guys could cause pain for a lot of opposing quarterbacks, especially against the offensive line that has been a bit watered down, to say the least.
Yeah, I'll just say I like the under in that one. All right, we're going to get to the one that BMAC likes the over in, and it's Packers, Texans, previewing that matchup right after this. The Texans travel up to Lambeau Field, where Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, his father, Bobby Slowick Sr., used to be the defense coordinator for the Green Bay Packers in the early 2000s. But a lot of great matchups to watch in this one. My favorite being this Packers offensive line, that's kind of a no-name offensive line. There may not be a lot of people who know the starters for the Green Bay Packers up front. Yet the results this season been about as good as almost any offensive line in the NFL. Probably playing like a top 5 unit right now. They have a top 2 rushing game in the NFL, trail only the Baltimore Ravens in terms of yards per game. Them going against Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, though, Kyle, what are you seeing in this matchup? How do you think that one plays out this Sunday?
Well, I think it starts with being at home, and you alluded to that. When you're at Lambeau, you have the luxury of these quarterbacks that have played there historically that have a really smart fan base. With all the pre-snap stuff that happens in the NFL, particularly with a Matt LaFleur offense, you have the luxury of being able to communicate that kind of thing. Also, you talk about the edge rushers, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, those guys can get home. But to your point, this Packers group has played above their weight class this entire year, and they're starting to garner some respect, some love, some Jordan love. And when Jordan Love is protected and you have it built into the scheme, we talked about it this morning on the podcast, the Packers have no problem throwing a tight end in there in protection to Chip. You see it with the running back out of the backfield as well. They build it in and couple it with their screen game extremely well, as good as anyone in the National Football League. And you've seen this Packers offense start to take shape. So you get these offensive tackles some help against these all-star edge rushers, and now you're looking at a more realistic pocket with some time and to do what Jordan Love wants to do, and that's deliver strikes down the football field, finding Christian Watson somewhere in a void.
For me, it's all about the quarterback matchup, man. These two players, C.J. Stroud and Jordan Love, they're really, really good in throwing the football. I mean, watching them throw the football is like a quarterback's teaching tape. This is how you should look when you're throwing the football when it comes to the accuracy, just the pocket presence, and just the big play ability that they both have. And I think both players are going to play extremely well. When you look at the numbers, I mean, these two guys have really been living up to the billing, to say the least. You know, we talked about C.J. Stroud, but quiet as kept. Look at what Jordan Love has done, especially if you look at the second half of the season a year ago that led to a playoff win for him being year one in his starting campaign. And now with him being finally healthy, that's the thing that I love what I watched last week against the Arizona Cardinals. It looks like he's finally healthy from that week 1 injury he sustained against the Philadelphia Eagles. So which quarterback is going to make plays and which quarterback is going to protect the football the most? I think that is going to play a big catalyst in deciding which side wins this ball game. And I said this earlier on in Kyle in the show. I was talking to Mike about this. You know, I'm a defender, so I'm biased. I don't like seeing a lot of points. But for this matchup, I'll throw my bias to the side. I'm okay in seeing points after points after points because I really love watching both of these quarterbacks play.
Hey, but Mike, hold on a second. This Packers team, I think they lead the NFL in turnovers. I think they've got 17. That's going to be a big part. To your point, they are going to be throwing the football all over B-Mac, but you know this Packers unit loves to take it away. So keep your eyes on that back end. Xavier McKinney has been unbelievable thus far.
X, no question.
Stroud's been one of the stingiest quarterbacks to start his career in NFL history in terms of not giving the ball to the other teams.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, 17 takeaways already for this Green Bay Packers defense. An insane, almost 3 a game they're averaging. And it's not just the picks. They're forcing some fumbles too. They forced 3 last week against the Arizona Cardinals. So that's where I, as a Packers fan, as you mentioned, I'm really watching is this defense because they've done some unique things in recent weeks to try to shore up this secondary. They now have 3 rookie starters in their back 7, whether it's Edgerrin Cooper, who's been getting a lot more run at linebacker, whether it's Javon Bullard, who started the year at safety. They now are playing him in the slot. They kicked Keyshawn Nixon, who was their slot cornerback, out to wide, and they made room for Evan Williams on the back end, a rookie 4th rounder who's been playing outstanding next to Xavier McKinney at safety. So that new look defense shut down the Rams, shut down the Cardinals. But what can it do against this Texans team? Because the Texans are a much, much different animal than any of those other teams. All right, we're going to get to the Thursday night football preview. We got the Broncos. We got the Saints. 2 rookie quarterbacks matched up tonight. We'll get to that right after this. Thursday night football looks to be a battle between a couple rookie quarterbacks. We have Bo Nix and the Broncos traveling to New Orleans to face the Saints and Spencer Rattler. Not a lot of points they're expecting. Vegas is 36.5 points is the over under. The Broncos are favored traveling on the road. I think a lot of that has to do with the newly minted 5th-round rookie as their starter going up against one of the most formidable defenses in the NFL. So, Kyle, I'm going to start with you. How do we see this Thursday night football game playing out?
Really good defense, really dangerous coordinator on that defense. You've got an offensive line for the Saints that are dealing with some injury that rank near the bottom of the barrel in terms of true drop back pass protection. Look for this Broncos team to roll against the Saints tonight unless Spencer Rattler goes out there and does some really wild stuff, which I don't expect him to do. Give me the Broncos tonight. I think that's really the matchup. It's going to be that offensive line and their inability to protect Spencer Rattler when they inevitably get into 3rd and 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, I agree as well. Give me the team that's healthier, right? Which is the Denver Broncos, even though they're dealing with some injuries as well, but not the amount that the Saints are currently dealing with. And give me the team that has the better coach in Sean Payton. I'm really loving what I'm seeing with the Denver Broncos under Sean Payton. With them being 3-3 right now, I think that has kind of exceeded the expectations, knowing that Bo Nix would be their day one starter as a rookie. Being 3-3, they've really done some pretty good things playing against really good teams, right? And finding ways to be competitive in those said ball games. Their defense has really exceeded the expectations. They've done a great job sacking quarterbacks. I think they're number 2 in the National Football League in sacks from the defensive side of things. And then when you look at how undermanned the Saints will be, not having their top 2 wide receivers. They're dealing with a lot of injuries on the offensive line. You talked about Spencer Rattler starting again against a very, very aggressive defense. It's going to be a tall task for them offensively to sustain drives and put points on the scoreboard. Anything can happen. But for me, when I just look at these 2 teams on paper, knowing the team that is the healthiest, I side with the Denver Broncos as well. And don't forget, I know Sean Payton said that, this isn't a bigger game than any other game. That's a lie. This is a big game for Sean Payton because he is a legend there in New Orleans with them winning the Super Bowl under his watch and then thinking about what he did just for the city when Hurricane Katrina hit at a time when the people living in New Orleans didn't have anything to be hopeful for. He provided hope based on coaching his team and being relevant. So when you look at how loyal the city of New Orleans is and how genuine, how authentic it is, he meant a lot to the people that were living there during that time. And then after Katrina as well, post-Katrina, so Hurricane Katrina. So this is going to be an emotional driven game. Not to mention, I think Drew Brees is going in the Hall of Honor with the team as well. So having his guy there and just having that ceremony along with him coaching the opposing team, there will be a lot of emotions in this game, mostly coming from Sean Payton. So this game means a lot to him.
Yeah, I think the Broncos are kind of playing with house money right now with where they're sitting at 3-3, right in the thick of the playoff picture. But the Saints, this is a must win. There's no sugarcoating it. They're 2-4. Yeah. They're 4-2 Falcons, the 4-2 Bucks. They lose this game. Curtains, the playoff picture, it's over. It's packed this season up after such high expectations with how they started through the first 2 weeks of the season. But I have to agree with you guys. The Broncos, this defense is going to present so many problems for Spencer Rattler. And Bo Nix, quietly, last 3 games, hasn't thrown a single turnover-worthy play according to PFF. He's turned a corner from at least a winning football perspective, and I think that gives them a chance to take this home. All right, we'll be back on Monday reviewing all the matchups you saw from the weekend. Until next time, keep pushing.